improving economic condition of their family, social, or national life. Okay, there's no report on that. So we'll go to text 18. Such persons are called Tri-Vardita because they are interested in three elevating processes. They are averse to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who can give relief to the conditioned soul. They are not interested in the Supreme Personality's pastimes, which are worth hearing because of his transcendental prowess. Well, prowess means powers. So the Lord has transcendental powers. But the non-devotees are not interested at all in hearing about the pastimes of the Lord, although they're worth hearing because they're all transcendental activities. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. According to Vedic thought, there are four elevating principles, namely religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation. Persons who are simply interested in material enjoyment make plans to execute prescribed duties. They are interested in the three elevating processes of religious rituals, economic elevation, and sense enjoyment. By developing their economic condition, they can enjoy material life. Materialistic persons, therefore, are interested in those elevating processes, which are called Tri-Varjika. Tri means three, Varjika means elevating processes. Such materialistic persons are never attracted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Rather, they are antagonistic towards Him. In other words, they're not interested at all. They don't really like to hear about the pastimes of Krishna. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is here described as Hari Medhaha, or He who can deliver one from the cycle of birth and death. Materialistic persons are never interested in hearing about the marvelous pastimes of the Lord. They think that they are fiction, in other words, stories that are made up, and that the Supreme Godhead is also a man of material nature. They think that Krishna is also an ordinary human being. They are not fit for advancing in devotional service or Krishna consciousness. Such materialistic persons are interested in newspaper stories, novels, and imaginary dramas. I thought it's amazing. The factual activities of the Lord, such as Lord Krishna's acting in the Battle of Kurukshetra, or the activities of the Pandavas, or the Lord's activities in Vrindavana or Dwarka, are related in the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, which are full of the activities of the Lord. But materialistic persons who engage in elevating their position in the material world are not interested in such activities of the Lord. They may be interested in the activities of a great politician or a great rich man, like Elon Musk or people like that of this world, but they are not interested in the transcendental activities of the Supreme Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Ram. Okay. Thank you all for coming, braving the cold weather and the snow. So you're real pioneers. I think this. Okay, so this verse, text 18, Canto 3, chapter 32, text 18 says, such persons are called Trivarjika because they're interested in the three elevating processes. They are adverse to the Supreme Personality of Godhead who can give relief to the conditioned soul. They are not interested in the Supreme Personality's pastimes, which are worth hearing because of his transcendental prowess. So, and in the purport it says, according to Vedic thoughts, there are four elevating principles, namely religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation. Persons who are simply interested in material enjoyment make plans to execute prescribed duties. They're interested in the three elevating processes of religious rituals, such as economic development, sense and sense enjoyment. Excuse me. Three elevating processes of religious rituals, economic development, and sense enjoyment. By developing their economic condition, they can enjoy material life. Materialistic persons, therefore, are interested in those elevating processes, which are called Trivarjika. Tri means three, Varjika means elevating processes. Such materialistic persons are never attracted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Rather, they are antagonistic towards him. Yeah, I've met people who openly said, I'm not interested at all in hearing about God. For me, that's a waste of time. I'm more interested in helping humanity, or I'm more interested in sense gratification. They openly speak like that. But here it says that it says there are four elevating principles, namely religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation. Persons who are simply interested in material enjoyment make plans to execute prescribed duties. Well, I mean, there are other people that don't follow prescribed duties, but these materialistic persons will engage in some prescribed duties, but only for material elevation so that they can go to heavenly planets, but not really to go back to Godhead. They are interested in the three elevating processes of religious activities: one, economic elevation; two, and sense enjoyment; three. Okay, so they do religious rituals. Like, for example, they will celebrate Diwali or different types of activities like that. And so they'll engage in religious rituals and economic elevation. Well, yeah, they will want to become like Elon Musk. And sense enjoyment. They go to uh, they go to different places for in sense enjoyment, vacations and nightclubs and so forth. By developing their economic condition, they can enjoy material life. Materialistic persons, therefore, are interested in those elevating processes, which are called tri-vargika. Tri means three, vargika means elevating processes. Such materialistic persons are never attracted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Rather, they are antagonistic toward Him. Well, that's a really sick type of consciousness when they're antagonistic toward Krishna. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is here described as Hari Medha, or he who can deliver one from a cycle of birth and death. Materialistic persons are never interested in hearing about the marvelous pastimes of the Lord. They think that they are fictions, in other words, made up stories, and that the Supreme Godhead is also a man of material nature. In other words, just like an ordinary human being, maybe just a little bit more, let's say, powerful than regular people. Okay, so it says, yeah, so such people are never attracted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Rather, they are antagonistic towards Him, meaning they don't really like Krishna at all. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead is here described as Hari Medha, or he who can deliver one from a cycle of birth and death. Nobody else can do that. Only Krishna can do that. Materialistic persons are never interested in hearing about the marvelous pastimes of the Lord. They think that they are fictions. In other words, they're just stories made up by, by people that are less intelligent. Okay. So, they think that they are fictions and stories, and that the Supreme Godhead is also a man of material nature. Krishna is just an ordinary person, maybe just a little bit more, let's say, powerful than other people, but nothing more than that. They are not fit, these type of people are not fit for advancing in devotional service or Krishna consciousness. Such materialistic persons are interested in newspaper stories, novels, and imaginary dramas. Yeah, they go to see movies, they go to see uh, dramas, uh, and they read novels and newspaper stories and internet, and so forth. The factual activities of the Lord, such as Lord Krishna's acting in the battle of Kurukshetra, or the activities of the Pandavas, or the Lord's activities in Vrindavana or Dwarka, are related to the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, which are full of activities of the Lord. But materialistic persons who engage in elevating their position in the material world, like the persons like Elon Musk and followers of Elon Musk, are not interested in such activities of the Lord. They may be interested in the activities of a great politician or a great rich man of this world, but they are not interested in the transcendental activities of the Supreme Lord. Okay, so if you're here right now, it's because you want to hear about Krishna's pastimes. You're not interested in Elon Musk's pastimes or other mundane, so-called famous people. Why? Because their lives are a dead end. And it ends up uh, that they will take birth after birth after birth after birth. Whereas if you hear Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and the Lord's activities in Vrindavan or Dwarka, and those activities in the, are related in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, which are full of activities of the Lord, you become spiritually enlightened. But if you just hear mundane things, the news, well, who all about all mundane subjects, then the stock market quotes and what the different Hollywood personalities are doing. They have whole books about that. You can go to the you can go to the bookstore, and every week they have these magazines about the lives of movie stars and who's dating who, and who's divorced who, and who went on a vacation, and the latest bikinis worn by so and so. So it's all complete nonsense. But materialistic persons who engage in elevating their position in the material world are not interested in such activities of Lord. They may be interested in the activities of a great politician or a great rich man of this world, but they are not interested in the transcendental activities of the Supreme Lord. Well, that's a very correct statement made by Prabhupada. Most people want to emulate rich men or women or movie stars or very powerful persons, like boxers or football players or basketball players. It's interesting, isn't it? Everything is about putting a ball in a basket or running across one line, or driving a car faster than everybody else. And the best is a baseball game. You just sit there, for about 2-3 hours and watch somebody throw a ball and hope that somebody else hits it. Actually, baseball is very boring, very very boring athletic type of so-called pastime, because most people, they'll drink beer, they'll eat crackers, and talk nonsense. And every once in a while, they stand up and start jumping up and down because somebody hit a home run. Baseball is very, very boring. Uh, you know, uh, at least soccer or football, every minute there's some activity going on. In baseball, it's very, especially if you have a good pitcher, and the pitcher keeps striking out people. There's nothing happening basically. So you just sit there, and most people drink beer and sit there. And if somebody hits a home run, they all jump up and down. You know, uh, we jump up and down also, but it's not because someone hits a home run. It's because we are worshiping Krishna. So there's different types of jumping up and down. Let's put it like that. Um, so Prabhupada says, but materialistic persons who engage in elevating their position in the material world are not interested in such activities to the Lord. They may be interested in the activities of a great politician or a great rich man of the world, but they're not interested in the transcendental activities of the Supreme Lord. Well, we see this all the time. Let's say uh, someone, some famous person is going to give a talk. Oh, everybody goes to that, right? Even though that person might be a very low class person, and they want to hear what that person has to say. So that person usually is very, prominent, rich man. So we'll talk about, different strategies how you can get rich. The people pay money to go to those type of, let's say, this type of, this type of, uh, what you would call, well, we have right now, we're listening to Bhagavatam. The mundane people, they'll go to different programs to learn how to become rich. And they have this advertisement now, how to become a multimillionaire in 3 weeks. So people pay, like 100 or 200 or 300 or $500 to be trained how to make, how to become a millionaire. So that means that they are basically brain dead. They're not interested at all in understanding their relationship with God. In fact, they think that type of information is a waste of time. And they're only interested in hearing about making money and sense gratification. And the more sense gratification they have, the more they're convinced that they're on the right track in life. But of course, that is false. Okay, so that's why Prabhupada says here. He says that the factual activities of the Lord, such as Lord Krishna's acting in the battle of Kurukshetra, or the activities of the Pandavas, or the Lord's activities in Vrindavana or Dwarka, are related in the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, which are full of the activities of the Lord. But materialistic persons who engage in elevating their position in the material world are not interested in such activities of the Lord. They may be interested in the activities of a great politician or a great rich man of this world, but they are not interested in the transcendental activities of the Supreme Lord. See, that's our that is Prabhupada's, let's say, takeaway for today. But materialistic persons who are engaged in elevating their position in the material world are not interested in such activities of the Lord. They may be interested in the activities of a great politician or a great rich man of this world, but they are not interested in the transcendental activities of the Supreme Lord. Well, yeah, when Elon Musk produces another new invention, oh, everyone's interested. They want to go see what it is. They want to hear about it. They'll read about it, and they get excited. But if there's a lecture on how to become Krishna conscious, oh, they don't go. They're not interested at all. That is, the sad state of the world today. Okay, text number 19. Any questions anybody has? Any questions? Yes,
Maharaj, you said the four elevating principles according to the Vedic knowledge are religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation. What we are doing in Krishna consciousness, right, Maharaj, where does that fall within this? Does it fall within the liberation category? Because that's what we're trying to liberate from material.
Actually, a genuine devotee is not interested in liberation.
I mean, that's what so we are doing outside any of these Maharaj, what we're doing.
And what we're doing is engaging life after life in the activities of Krishna consciousness. So that's a state of liberation. We're already liberated if we do that. So it doesn't matter, if we get, wings like an angel and fly up into the so-called the spiritual world, it doesn't matter whether we're in the material world or we're in the spiritual world, as long as we're engaged in devotional service and in the company of other devotees. You see, the Mayavadis, they avoid the company of other people, and they find some place like a cave or their apartment or something, and they do silent meditation. To do silent meditation, well, there can't be any noise, so they try and find a place that's secluded, and then they meditate. Devotees, on the other hand, they have Sankirtan parties where there's chanting and dancing, and also there's class. So they're not interested in being alone somewhere like a cave and silently meditating. Just imagine how boring that is. You're in some kind of a cave, or you close yourself in the closet and you just meditate silently. And usually they meditate on nothing, or they meditate on the tip of their nose, or they meditate on, I don't know, their girlfriend or boyfriend, whatever. So that type of meditation is a complete waste of time. But real meditation is meditating on Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam, meditating on the Lord's activities in Vrindavan or Dwarka, or the activities of the Pandavas, or or Krishna's acting in the Battle of Kurukshetra. These are the real interests of the devotees. They're not interested in secular things like, there's a war going on in this country, and there's a tsunami in that country, and there is a political upheaval in this other country. You read the newspaper, it's usually pretty bad things happening around the world. If there were no bad things happening around the world, everyone was happy, no one would buy a newspaper. But when they hear about, how many people were killed today by, this army or that army, they're interested in that. They're interested to see how many people were murdered today. But to hear about, well, we planted so many nice trees and we chanted Hare Krishna and we ate only prasadam. Well, for them, it's like boring. You won't be able to sell a newspaper if that's the only news you have. So the news has got to be spectacular, How many people were murdered today? Oh, okay. And they bought a newspaper. All right. Now the Russians have a brand new weapon that can kill millions of people by the new bomb that they produced. Well, they read about that. But hearing about how someone went to a class and learned something about Krishna, well, that's not news. That's like zero for materialistic people. So that's why Prabhupada says, but materialistic persons who engage in elevating their position in the material world are not interested in such activities of the Lord. They may be interested in the activities of a great politician or a great rich man of this world, but they are not interested in the transcendental activities of the Supreme Lord. There it is. This is the difference between a materialistic person and a devotee. Prabhupada just nails it right on the head. They're not interested in the Krishna conscious activities or Krishna consciousness. but they are interested in the activities of politicians or very rich people. Okay, but not in the transcendental activities of the Lord. Text number 19. Such persons are condemned by the supreme order of the Lord because they are averse to the nectar of the activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They are compared to stool-eating hogs. Well, next time when you go to school or you're in your office and someone starts talking about how wonderful they read this book or a novel, well, you can tell them, you are a stool-eating hog. Well, don't do that. That wouldn't be nice. You know. But that's who they are. What they're reading is like stool, and stool is for hogs. It's not for human beings. So some of the rubbish books, and most of the books today are rubbish. There's always about there's love, and then there's uh, love lost, and then there's chivalry, and then there's fighting, and this and that. Actually, in the movie industry, there's only about 8 uh, types of activities, and why don't you look that up? It's very interesting. The themes of different movie, uh, movies, action movies or different
genre.
yeah. There's only about 8 types of films that they show, and it's always everything's really nice in the beginning, and then something happens, and someone is kidnapped or someone is murdered, and now they're trying to find out who did the murder, and then they finally catch the murderer, and then that's it. That's the program. That's the movie.
So there are different genres of movies. One is action.
Yeah.
These are fast-paced films with high energy sequences, physical stunts, and intense conflict.
Say it louder.
These are the fast-paced films with high energy sequences, physical stunts, and intense conflict. So that's the action movies. Then there is adventure. Adventure features journeys, explorations, and quests with an emphasis on discovery and excitement. Then there is comedy, designed to entertain and make audience laugh through humor. Then there is drama, serious character-driven stories focusing on emotional themes and conflicts. Next is horror, aims to create fear, suspense, and unease, often featuring supernatural elements. Then
Well,
thriller,
that kids like that. Scary stories.
intense and suspenseful, often involving crime, mystery, or espionage. Then science fiction explores futuristic, speculative, or technological themes, often set in space or alternate realities. Fantasy incorporates magical elements, mythical creatures, and imaginative worlds. Mystery revolves around solving a crime, puzzle, or uncovering hidden truths. Romance centers on love stories and relationships, often with emotional depth. Then, then there's other types, but these are like crime, specifically focused on criminals, detectives, and justice system. Then there is Western category, which focuses on the American West, cowboys, outlaws, and frontier justice. Musicals incorporate song and dance as a key storytelling element. Documentary, non-fiction films that depict real-life events. war genre, means like explores themes of warfare, combat, and military conflicts, and then animation.
Animation.
So these are using, instead of real life characters, they use animated films using CGI or hand drawn or stop motion techniques.
Bugs Bunny.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is all called, entertainment. Most entertainment, I mean, there, of course, you just read different types of entertaining movies.
Category. Yeah.
Category. But one time there was a man, he went to a movie theater. He was sitting down eating some popcorn. He was watching the movie. And at one point in the movie, there's a man that's choking a woman to death. And he got really, upset. And he ran up on the stage and touched the
Screen.
the screen. He thought some lady was it looked so real to him. And then he realized it was just, black and white dots. No woman was being choked to death. But when he was sitting down, maybe 20 feet away, it looked like a woman was actually being choked to death. That's why he ran up and he wanted to stop the man from choking her. Then he realized there's just black and white dots on the screen. So that's basically what people do. They waste their time watching movies, and they're basically black and white dots on a screen. They're not, anything of real consequence. And you don't really learn anything by watching different types of movies. And you just named the different themes of movies. So it's basically a waste of time. You would do better chanting Hare Krishna and going on Sankirtan. And now you go on Sankirtan, you're engaging in real activities. You're talking to people. And you're talking about, how they can become Krishna conscious. And now they can, like sometimes on Sankirtan, you meet someone, you give them a burrito, and they're so thankful. And sometimes they start crying. And now these are real emotions. They're not fake. They're real emotions. And then you understand how there's so many people that are lonely in the world. And now you go and give them something like a burrito, and you talk to them, and you give them a book about how they can, have a spiritual life. And it's a very, very intense moment for certain people, because most people live a very dull life, and they don't have the opportunity to meet genuine devotees. So they watch television and they watch movies, which are all just make-believe nonsense. But then they meet a real person, a devotee, who's giving them a burrito, who's talking to them about Krishna, Supreme Personality Godhead, and giving them a chance to have a book about spiritual life. That's real drama, because you're helping a person become a better person by teaching them something about Krishna consciousness. And then a person becomes so interested that they'll start coming regularly to the temple. And at first they're a little surprised, because they see people jumping up and down, shouting out loud, Haribol, Haribol. They're thinking, these people are crazy. But then, little by little, they start jumping up and down and chanting, Haribol, Haribol. So they joined the crazies. But they're not crazy. They are glorifying Krishna. So here, therefore, it says, but materialistic persons who engage in elevating their position in the material world are not interested in such activities of the Lord. They may be interested in the activities of a great politician or a great rich man of this world, but they are not interested in the transcendental activities of the Supreme Lord. That's wow. Oh, way over 90% of people. Okay, so text number 19. Such persons are condemned by the supreme order of the Lord because they are averse to the nectar of the activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They are compared to stool-eating hogs and pigs. They give up hearing the transcendental activities of the Lord and indulge in hearing of the abominable activities of materialistic persons. Well, you definitely don't want to be a stool-eating hog. Yeah, when you go to school and you see everybody talking about mundane things, you go up to them and say, you know, you're a stool-eating hog. Of course, they'll get really upset, so don't do it. But that's what they actually are. You know, when they're going from one class to another and they're talking nonsense, and you can say, "Hey, you're a stool-eating hog." All right, so Prabhupada writes, everyone is addicted to hearing of the activities of another person, whether a politician or a rich man or an imaginary character whose activities are created in a novel. That's like Superman. People go to movies to watch Superman. And sometimes Superman will come to uh, a, uh, a program and people get excited. Oh, Superman is going to be there. I'm going to go and see him. Everyone is addicted to hearing of the activities of another person, whether a politician or a rich man or an imaginary character whose activities are created in a novel. There are so many nonsensical literatures, stories, and books of speculative philosophy. Materialistic persons are very interested in reading such literature, but when they are presented with genuine books of knowledge like Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Vishnu Purana, or other scriptures of the world, such as the Bible or the Quran, they are not interested. Have any of you ever read the Quran? Yeah. I started to read the Quran, but I got so bored reading it, I stopped. It didn't really connect to it. I know some people are, super connected to it.
Was it after your Krishna conscious journey or before?
Both. Every time I try and read the Quran, I get bored and I put it down. I know some people are very excited by reading Quran. As far as the Bible goes, Bible, I get bored also because the Old Testament is all about the history of the Jews, and the New Testament is all about Jesus Christ. So the New Testament is interesting. I can read that. The Old Testament, I can't read that. It's too boring. So the life of Jesus is pretty, let's say, exciting when you read it.
What's covered in Quran, Maharaj?
What's covered in the Quran? The activities of Allah.
Is it activities of Allah or just the Muhammad? Because they
Well,
don't describe activities of Allah, right? No,
well, they can't see Allah, but they're always talking about Allah, in the Quran. Well, let's put it. I have never really studied the Quran. Let's put it like that. I've looked at it and I read it a little bit, but I wasn't really inspired by it at all. No, that doesn't mean. I mean, other people are inspired by it, and they'll be reading it all the time. But myself, I was always interested in Krishna consciousness. I never really got interested in these other things. And well, the Bible is interesting in some ways, especially the New Testament. The Old Testament is all about, wars and killing and things like that. The New Testament is a little bit better. It's about, the life of Jesus. So that's worth hearing. Why? Well, you're hearing about, the crucifixion of Jesus. So he was willing to sacrifice himself to help other people make spiritual advancement. But again, it's all about someone being nailed to a cross and tortured till they die. So it's really not so invigorating. And you see that most stories about Jesus, they try to make his life interesting, but actually it's horrible because he's going to be crucified. He's the Son of God, and he's nailed to a cross, and then he suffers on the cross and dies. Then he's put in some cave. His dead body is put in a cave, and it comes back to life. And he comes back for about 40 days, walks around and scares everyone, and then he goes back to Godhead. So it's not that invigorating. It's not that exciting. Whereas Christmas pastimes are fun. You don't see people crying. You don't see people. Well, there is violence also in Christmas pastimes, but it's a different type of violence. You see, in the material world, the violence you hear about, it causes people to die. But in Krishna's pastimes, when someone is killed by Krishna, they go back to Godhead. They don't really die. They attain eternal life. So it's completely different. Whereas the mundane stories, if someone dies, that means it's the end of their life. And it's sad, and it's gory, it's got a lot of blood involved in it, and so forth. But when you hear about Krishna's pastimes, even when he kills someone, it's actually transcendental, because that person goes back to Godhead. So it's a completely different type of literature.
Maharaj,
Yes,
Jesus is the Son of God.
yeah.
Why? I mean, there's a lot of learnings and teachings from the Bible and from Jesus' pastimes. Why did the Son of the God have such a sad ending where he is crucified? He has to go through a lot of pain. He is the Son of God.
That's because they don't have knowledge of Krishna. So, well, even in Krishna consciousness, there are more the Pandavas. All their kids were murdered. So there's a lot of gory stuff in Krishna consciousness also. Uh, that's just the nature of material life. Material life is terrible. It's not nice. So you're being taught by hearing, let's say, the life of let's say, of Krishna. Even there, Krishna is put sometimes in difficult situations, right? And for example, he gets Uh, there are certain situations in which it looks like he's going to be killed, but he isn't. Uh, that's the nature of the material world. There's a lot of horrible things happening. So if you look at Jesus as Superman, right? He is tortured on the cross, and then he dies, and then he resurrects and goes around and scares people, but inspires his devotees, and then he disappears again, goes back to the spiritual world. So that's a narrative that leads to sadness. Whereas the pastimes of Krishna, again, there's birth, there's death also, but actually, Krishna never is defeated. So it doesn't end up with a lot of dead people. You end up with the eternal life of Krishna and his devotees. So there's different ways of looking at what is entertainment. Of course, all these things are entertainment, right? But in the case of the Bible, or in the case of Bhagavad Gita, the understanding is that God is eternal, and there's an opportunity for people to become eternal also.
So one observation
Yeah.
is that whenever Krishna during his entire pastimes, this clearly depicted that Krishna is in full control. It's his desire a particular leela to play. So his Lord is fully, like, even when his departure was, or his arrival, everything was like completely orchestrated by him. And the Shastra also describes that as, it's not like he is not in control. Whereas in case of Jesus or some of these other cases, I don't think it's. They show the pastimes of, the more of the evil of the material world,
Yeah.
as opposed to. There is a glorification of the Lord's Son, but more to maybe transform the people in the world to show the goriness and everything.
Well, even in the history of Krishna, there is the story that he was killed by someone who killed him by putting an arrow in his foot.
Yeah.
Right. That is actually a false narrative.
Yeah.
There are certain things in the Shastras that are false narratives just to trick the atheists to not believe in God. Those stories are actually false stories. Now, why would they be put in the Shastra, false stories like that? Well, it's to separate the people who are not serious and people who are serious. People who are serious, they know that Krishna can never be killed. He's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's not an ordinary human being. But there can be pastimes. There are some pastimes that are put in a Shastra where it looks like Krishna was killed. Now, how do you deal with that? Well, you have to understand that these stories, there's a few stories like that in the Shastra, to see, it's like a test to see if someone really has faith in Krishna or doesn't have faith in Krishna. Obviously, every one of us is eternal, including Krishna. And so if you hear that, excuse me, Krishna died by somebody put an arrow in his foot and then he died, and you say, oh, well, he's no different than us. Those are fake stories, actually, but they're purposely put to to separate the atheists from the devotees. So what is a devotee? A devotee has complete faith in Krishna and understands that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so he cannot be killed. He's, and we also cannot be killed in the sense that we have an eternal soul. So all these stories about, there's wars and people are being killed, so forth, they are actually testing us to see how how our consciousness is. So for Christians, it's a harrowing conscience because they see their guru crucified on a cross, right, and suffering. So it's not a really happy ending of Lord Jesus. But in Krishna consciousness, Krishna sometimes is in harrowing situations, but he always comes out victorious. So that's a much nicer, let's say, narrative. And then you understand that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of God. It cannot be killed. It cannot be put into illusion. He cannot be in any way like a mundane person. Whereas in the Bible, you see that Jesus is crucified. Now, of course, it says that he resurrects from the dead, goes around and scares people for about 40 days, and then he goes back to his Father. But it's full of blood and misery. The history of Jesus is full of blood and misery. That's one way of looking at it. And in the end, however, he does go back to his Father and sits next to him. Who is his father? His father is Krishna. So, of course, the Christians, they mix up, father and the son, and they think that Jesus is both the father and the son. Right? So it gets all confusing. But if you read it correctly, yeah, there is a father that Jesus has, and that father is Krishna. So he is a devotee. And he does go through a lot of harrowing experiences, but never loses faith. In fact, when he's on the cross, being crucified, at one point he shouts out to Krishna and says, "Why are you doing this to me?" But then he, gets control of his mind again and understands that it's the purpose of the Lord that he be crucified. So then he accepts it. But at one point, he does, question Krishna and say, "Why are you doing this? Why am I being crucified like this?"
I just asked Maharaj about how to understand Krishna's death if he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Just wanted to see how. It exactly said what you said. Number one, it said Krishna's departure was a divine play, Leela. Krishna, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagavan, is beyond birth and death. His so-called death is part of his Leela, divine passage, just as his birth in Mathura was also a transcendental event.
It was not a seminal birth.
Yes. And then the curse of the sages and the destruction of the Yadu dynasty. The sages cursed the Yadu dynasty due to the pride and mischief of Krishna's descendants. This led to infighting among the Yadavas, ultimately fulfilling Krishna's will for the dissolution of his earthly family before his own departure. The arrow of Jara, a pretext. Krishna was not killed by Jara, the hunter. The arrow striking his foot was merely a symbolic event. Krishna left his material form by his own will, as seen in Srimad Bhagavatam 11:31, 1-6, where divine beings witnessed his ascension to the spiritual world. His eternal spiritual form was seen rising to his original abode, Goloka Vrindavana. Why did he leave? Because Krishna's mission was complete. He established Dharma through Bhagavad Gita and fulfilled the purpose of reducing the burden of the earth, killing Kamsa and ending the Kurukshetra war. He chose to live as his form is beyond birth and death. Spiritual confirmation of his eternal nature, like for example, Bhagavad Gita 9:11. Fools deride me when I descend in the human form, not knowing my transcendental nature as the supreme lord of all that can be, or that be. And then in Srimad Bhagavatam 1:1942, Bhishma's own words, Krishna's body is not material. He only appears to take birth and leave. And then again in Brahma Samhita 5.1, Krishna is beginningless. The Supreme Lord Govinda is the cause of all causes. So the conclusion is that Krishna did not die like an ordinary being. Krishna's departure is a transcendental act, not a death. He withdrew from the world after fulfilling his divine mission, leaving his teachings and his eternal presence in the form of his holy name, the deity, and his devotees.
Yeah, one time I met this Muslim guy, and he said, because I like you, he said, I'm going to tell you the truth about your Krishna. And he started talking about how Krishna, he had an arrow in his foot and he died, right? And like he wanted to educate me because he liked me, right? So I told him, I said, you don't understand anything about the spiritual life or especially about Krishna. So I said, before you try to educate me in Krishna and think that you know what you're talking about, it's better you just talk about what your religion is. Don't try and talk about Krishna because you don't understand anything. Right? I warned him. I said, otherwise, if you keep talking like this, I said, I'll start, insulting you and your religion. So I said, so be very careful with what you're saying is complete nonsense. There are people like that. So he said, well, I want to help you. I want you to learn the truth. Your God was killed. So I said, look, I don't want to hear anything more from you. You don't know what you're talking about. I said, but if you keep talking, then I'm going to start insulting you and your religion and your faith in the so-called Allah. So, he walked away. Yeah, sometimes people, they think they know so much that they can, explain how Krishna is basically, a fictional character, and the only truth is Allah. Well, that is true. I mean, we accept that that's another name of God. But the fact that they personally, in a very gross way, going to convince you that Krishna is a fairy tale, that's not acceptable. Okay. So any questions, comments?
So in case of Jesus, when he throughout his life, not knowing the Bible fully, I mean, it looks like, again, going back to my observation was that Krishna was fully in control from his appearance because he is the Supreme Lord. The Maya cannot, be controlling him. In everything was going according to his will. Whereas in case of Jesus, the plan of Jesus was actually going by the will of Krishna. So was it possible that Jesus himself was in illusion at times? Maybe it may be Yogamaya. not knowing why he was going through the torture that he was going through.
Well, he does say that when he's being tortured. He says to, he prays to God, he said, why are you doing this to me?
Hmm.
But he does not, that's not his last thought. Obviously, it's not a nice thing to have nails in your feet and your hands. And, people put a crown of needles on your head, right? And make you carry a very heavy cross, and then they nail you to the cross, and then they also stick a spear right into his ribs, right? So it was not very nice. And see, this is the problem with Christianity. You hear of Krishna being put on a cross and being crucified? No, you don't. In other words, the guru is put on a cross and crucified. It's like horrible, right? That's why in Christianity, basically, you end up being very sad because somehow or other your guru is being crucified on the cross and being tortured, basically. It was torture. Now, the fact that he resurrects, okay, that sort of softens the narrative. But to just hear about the crucifixion of Jesus is horrible. Just imagine, Srila Prabhupada's been put on a cross and nailed to a cross and suffers until he dies. I mean, it's unimaginable to hear such a thing. But that's what the Christians are hearing about their guru. That he's put on a cross and he suffers for so much time, and then he actually dies, and then eventually he resurrects from the dead. But even when he resurrects from the dead, basically what he does is he goes around for 40 days, but he scares people because they saw him actually die and his body was put into a cave, and a big rock closed the cave. But now this man is walking around and he's alive, right?
Who was scared, Maharaj? Is it his devotees are scared or the people who actually did it?
They were all scared. They were all scared. There's the doubting Thomas, who's a disciple of Jesus. He couldn't believe it, right? So he had to stick his finger into the wound, into the place where he was pierced, right? To make sure that he was actually real, right? He thought he was seeing some type of a hallucination. But then he realized it was real. So he's called Doubting Thomas. Well, how would you feel? You see someone crucified and they die, and now the person's walking around. You would be freaked out also, And in the history of, if you look stories about Krishna, the pastimes of the Lord, they're mostly happy. Even when he goes to war, it's you end up happy. You don't feel scared. You don't feel like there's any goriness or something that is horrible, because all the people that are killed by Krishna, they go back to Godhead. So it's not really a birth, death, old age, and disease. It's transcendental activity of the Lord, and it's always beneficial for the good guys and the bad guys. Even the bad guys, it's beneficial for them. They go back to God. So it's a different type of narrative, the pastimes of Krishna. But to see your guru crucified and people making, sacrilegious statements and making him, carry a cross and have a crown of needles on his head and blood coming out. And it's like horrible saying to see the guru treated like that. And then being on the cross all day long, with two, criminals with him, right? As if he's like a criminal also. And in the end, they're all killed. Right? Okay, but there's the resurrection of Krishna, but still, it's not a nice narrative at all. Whereas in the case of Krishna, is Krishna ever killed? Not really. It looks like it's killed, but actually that's also a misleading story. Purposely put in his pastime so that non-devotees will be satisfied that he's not God. Whereas in reality, that's actually a false story that's been put there. So that happens all the time. Even in the material world, you have people who it looks like they died, right? But actually, it was just planned like that. They didn't really die, and so it's to trick other people. So the history of Jesus being crucified, Prabhupada was asked about that once, and the devotee said, "Well, he was crucified. He like suffered on the cross." And Prabhupada said, "I don't think so." No, he's not saying that he didn't believe he was crucified, but he didn't believe that he suffered on the cross because he was always thinking of his father. So you have the example of Haridas Thakur. Huh? Yeah. Did he suffer being beaten in 22 different places? No. In fact, the two guys that were making him, beating him, so forth, they pleaded to him, when it came to the 22nd place where they're torturing him. They said, "Look, if we don't kill you," said, "they're going to kill us. So please die so that we don't die." So Haridas Thakur said, "Oh, okay." So it looked like he was dead. And then the person that wanted him dead, he made sure he came and looked at his body and then kicked it. And then he was convinced that he was dead. Then they threw his body into the Ganges. And then he sort of floated down the Ganges, then came out of the water. And then in the evening time, he went to the house of the man that tortured him. And when he knocked on the door, the man was shocked, And then he was warned. He said, "Don't ever do this again to anyone," So there's a happy ending always in Krishna consciousness. Whereas in the case of Jesus, all right, he resurrects from the dead, and then he goes back to his father. That's a somewhat of a happy ending also. But there's a lot of similarities between the Jesus story and the Krishna story. And that's interesting to see the similarities. There are some differences, but there are similarities also. So then we understand that in history, history is always repeating itself. There's always the hero who goes through harrowing experiences and eventually comes out victorious. Okay. So here, finally in text 21, it says, when the results of their pious activities are exhausted, they fall down by higher arrangement and again come back to this planet. Just as any person raised to a high position sometimes all of a sudden falls down. So,
We just finished 19.
oh, 19. Oh, okay. So I was reading 21, sorry. I like 21, that's why I started reading. Okay, anyway, we'll stop right there. Are there any questions anyone would like to ask?
The last sentence of 19 sums it up all in the purpose.
The message of the Lord's activities is nectar.
Yeah.
And besides that message, any information in which we may be interested is actually hellish. Well, yeah, the activities of the Lord is nectar. The message of the Lord's activities is nectar. And besides that message, any information in which we may be interested is actually hellish. Okay. Well, most of the stories that we hear are hellish. You know, little kids being kidnapped by a sex maniac, or so many people died today, were killed today in the war, or there was a hurricane and so many people died. And every day, you know, you read in the newspapers about people who are suffering and dying. So you think, wow, that'll never happen to me. But it can happen to all of us. So we can see how death is always, you know, walking behind us. Therefore, we should take chanting Hare Krishna seriously. The only way, I mean, I chose to become a devotee when I learned from the devotees and the Shastras that your karma can be eliminated by becoming a devotee. Now, I knew I had bad karma because I was experiencing bad things happening to me. And when I heard that you can purify your karma by Krishna consciousness, that was the thing that convinced me to become a devotee. And then I took up Krishna consciousness. And it happened. All the bad things that were happening to me stopped almost immediately. And now, what am I, 79 years old. And all those years from the point I surrendered to Krishna have been happy years. You know, there's always some situations that are tests. So I was able to pass those tests and never became discouraged. And that's because of good association. If you have good association, even if there are horrendous tests that you might have to go through, you can do it because there's at least one person who's an honest person. That means that you don't lose faith in Krishna consciousness. So if there's nobody around you who's an honest person, but then you can take shelter in Prabhupada. He's an honest person. Therefore, all you need is one honest person, one genuine devotee, and that'll give you the faith to survive through all difficult situations. All right. Are there going to be difficult situations? Yes. Are we going to be tested? Yes. Can we pass the test? Well, it depends on how much faith you have in Krishna. If you have unflinching faith for the Lord, then you can tolerate all difficult situations and come out victorious, like the Pandavas, right? By the way, after the battle of Kurukshetra, only the Pandavas were alive. Almost everybody else died. And that means hundreds and thousands of people died in that battle. But the Pandavas, in some mysterious, wonderful way, they didn't die. So that should be a signal to us that if we have complete faith in Krishna, even though we're tested severely, as long as we don't lose our faith in Krishna, somehow or other, we will come out, unscathed by our experiences. But that's a question of faith. Faith means you have absolute, confidence in something that you don't see, but you know it's real. So we might not see Krishna, but we know he's real. It's not a fairy tale. So if you have that type of faith, then you can tolerate all situations that you're in, even the most harrowing situation. Right. So Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
If you actually experience the message of the Lord's activities as being nectar, and besides that message, any information which we may be interested is actually any other information that we may be interested in is actually hellish. Yeah.
What percentage of our lives we are living in hell? Majority.
Yeah, well, it says that in this purport, materialistic persons are considered condemned because they're interested in hellish activities and not in transcendental activities. Yeah, so most of the movies that they make, they're all hellish. People are being killed, and eventually, the heroine or the hero comes out victorious. Right? I think there's only like 9 or 10 plots of stories.
Yeah, particularly Indian movies have
Only
only
one plot.
one plot.
Maharaj, all these movies, even though all the movies are fictional, all the movie stars, like people who they are real, but they are like such bad influence, Maharaj. They all have hellish lives.
That's a fact. Yeah.
Even if you say, okay, the movies are fictional, the people who are acting in those whom everybody reveres, and all the sports stars also. Some of them are okay, but most of them have hellish lives. They have huge influence of drugs, highly attracted to money and fame. So they make, and they make a lot of bad decisions. All the kids listen to
Illicit
them.
sex. That's the big ticket. Illicit sex. Marilyn Monroe is an example. Very beautiful young lady. She became completely corrupted. And it was so bad she committed suicide. Although she was so famous and wealthy, she was surrounded by all these lusty men, and she just committed. She was so sad. She felt like she was just being used, and she just imagine the suffering she went through. Although she's so famous and has so much money, she committed suicide. Yeah. So that should be a big lesson to us, the value of Krishna consciousness. Because even though you might be very rich, even though you might be Marilyn Monroe, is very famous, has money, so many people are, trying to have sex with her and so forth. She's a sex symbol, actually, speaking of a sex symbol in the Western world. But actually, she was miserable. and she committed suicide. You know how sad you have to be, and how completely devastated you have to be to commit suicide. So better not to be a movie star. Just to be a regular person and be a devotee, chant Hare Krishna and be happy. All goes to Shiva.
Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you very much, my dear happy devotees. Prabhupada said, I have come to make the hippies to happy. The hippies were, the whole hippie movement was a complete failure. At one time, it looked like, oh, everybody's going to become a hippie. But that also came and went away. I don't have any hippies anymore. But Prabhupada said, I've come to make the hippies into happies. That did happen. And the happies are still here. What is that?
This is the sweater.
What is it?
The sweater.
Oh,
We had ordered.
oh, thank you.
But
That's all right. You want me to be well dressed and warm.
I don't know.
Okay.
I want you to be healthy.
Yeah.